Black Phone 2 is the latest film from Scott Derrickson and C. Robert Cargill. I had the opportunity to watch this film at Fantastic Fest. It is the sequel to the very popular The Black Phone in 2021. Yes, they drop the from the Black Phone. Now it's just Black Phone 2. For some reason, they don't explain it. I don't know. You let me know why you think that's the reason. Mason Thames returns, Madeleine McGraw, as well as Ethan Hawke in this very weird sequel that I don't think anybody asked for, but I'm telling you, you need it. Check out my review for it. This is one of my favorite films of the year. I think it's my favorite horror film of the year so far, so go check out that review if you want. Let's get into it. Spoilers ahead. Yes, we're going to talk everything about this film. Full spoilers for you. If you don't want spoilers, do not watch this video. Go watch the movie and then come back to it. We're going to discuss some of the things that I think are going to be interesting if they decide to make this a franchise, because this has a lot of legs to become a franchise in my opinion, and I'm excited about that. We kick off 13 days of Halloween on the 18th, so make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. Don't miss out on all the things you love in pop culture right here, because we got some theories of where the grabber could go next as well in the coming days, so don't miss out on it. And let's get into it. The movie begins in 1957 with a young woman named Hope receiving a call at a phone booth at a camp that looks like a snowy camp. So it's a winter camp of sorts. And that's pretty much where the movie starts off. You don't get any more insight into this, not just yet. Then we pretty much go forward in time to 1982, 4 years after the events of the Black Phone, in which Finney was taken by the grabber and eventually got help from ghost kids as well as his young sister Gwen, who has visions of things, and she was able to get an upper hand on the grabber and kill him and escape. He made national headlines, but nothing could prepare him for the trauma that followed all these years after, as now he has become sort of violent and a recluse of sorts and doesn't ever want to talk about what happened. This hinders his relationship with his sister as well, and you see both of them suffer because of that. The sister, on the other hand, is also having some weird visions of sorts of young kids being killed, mutilated by somebody that she can't really see, but we do know it's going to be the grabber. She eventually finds out this all happened at a winter camp called Alpine Camp, so she decides to tell Finney, let's go be counselors there, figure out what's going on. I think we need to get to the bottom of this because I think it's the grabber again. Finney gets mad about this because in his eyes, the grabber is dead, although he keeps hearing the phone ringing. So that kind of makes him wonder, is he really dead? And alongside Robin's younger brother, Ernesto, Robin, of course, was one of the kids that the grabber ultimately killed in the first film and one of Finney's friends. And pretty much the reason that Finney decided to fight the grabber was because of Robin talking to him from the other side. So three of them decide to go to Alpine Camp where they're going to become counselors, and we also find out that their mother Hope actually was working at this camp at a point, and it's the mother that was at the beginning of the film on the phone in 1957. It seems that Gwen and her mother Hope share these visions that they have and sort of are able to see into the future or have more foresight than other people do, and this is something that their father discussed as well in the first film. Now he has become sobered up actually and isn't an alcoholic like he was in the first one. The kids eventually arrive at the camp where they are greeted by 4 people that are working the camp. Everybody else couldn't arrive to the camp like the counselors or all the other campers due to the freak blizzard that happened, so now they're going to be in this camp by themselves. Now, one of the things that ultimately gets the kids into a pickle here is that they can't sleep in the same cabin. Boys and girls have to be separated. So Ernesto and Finney take one cabin, and we see Gwen takes the other by herself. And this is where the torment happens from the grabber, because he's able to separate them. He torments Finney at the phone booth where he tells them that he's pissed. He killed him. He killed his brother. And now he's going to kill Gwen because of this. And there's nothing Finney can do. And he's going to kill Finney as well. Gwen, on the other hand, however, has visions and dreams of the grabber, and in these dreams, the grabber is able to hurt her, pretty much like a Freddy Krueger type character. So we see that the grabber really is sort of like instigating Gwen and starts to really torment her as much as he can before he says he will kill her. Gwen has to figure out how can she bring the grabber down, because right now he has full power over all of them. And this is where her visions come in handy, because she realizes that the grabber is getting his power from the victims that he took at Alpine Camp. And we find out from the other people working the camp that the grabber actually was somebody who worked at the camp a long time ago, pretty much the same time that Finney and Gwen's mother worked there as well, and his name was Bill, otherwise known as Wild Bill, and he was a tremendous ice skater, but also a lunatic that killed 3 young children here, and their bodies were never found, and it sort of was a thing that haunted the camp and eventually led to it being shut down because of this, and they never caught Wild Bill, and of course we know Wild Bill went on to become the Grabber. And I thought those scenes with the kids where the Grabber was killing them were so morbid, so dark, so scary. I think Scott Derrickson did a tremendous job alongside his wife because his wife helped them film some of these scenes, as he said at Fantastic Fest. They were shot on sort of like a grainy, like celluloid type film, and that made it more scary to see. This is how Gwen's dreams are also shot, so it kind of adds another layer to them, and it really makes for a unique experience when you're watching this film. Now, the rest of the camp doesn't really believe that the Grabber spirit's out here causing torment or any of this. That isn't until one night when the Grabber decides to finally kill Gwen by putting her into a open and on oven, and we see everybody look in shock as Gwen levitates into the oven. Of course, they can't see the Grabber holding her up, put her in there, so they're pretty much like wondering what's going on. They decide to believe Gwen, and they go on a mission now to find all 3 bodies of the young children that the Grabber killed all those years ago in order for him to lose his power that he has over them. With the help of the people at the camp, Finney and Gwen and Ernest are able to start finding the bodies of the children, and just as they're about to find the final one, the Grabber decides to ultimately try and kill Gwen one more time, but right before he kills her, he decides to give her one last revelation, one last gift, he says. He decides to show Gwen the truth, and that is that Gwen and Finney's mother was actually onto him with her visions and was able to pinpoint exactly where he had the victims and what he was doing, and just as she was about to inform authorities about all of this, he was able to find her and ultimately kill her, and what he did actually was make it seem like she did it herself, and thus that's the lie that Gwen and Finney have been fed and their father as well all of this time, is that Gwen and Finney's mother had actually taken her own life, when in fact it was the Grabber that did this years before he actually took Finney, and that pretty much is what has tied them all together all of these years. It was pretty much the connection that Gwen's mother had to the Grabber when they both worked at the camp leading up to the events right before the Black Phone 1, when we saw that Finney's mother ultimately took her life, but it wasn't that exactly. The Grabber had ultimately taken her life and made it seem like she did it herself, so nobody would think anything of it. We eventually see the final confrontation take forth in the ice now with Gwen and Finney's father, who arrives to try and get his children back. They all go against the Grabber now, the people at the camp, Finney, Ernesto, as well as Gwen, but ultimately the Grabber seems to get the upper hand as Gwen falls into sleep because she's been trying not to sleep, and eventually this tiredness and all of this gets to her, so she falls asleep. So now Gwen has to fight the Grabber in the dream world while everybody else is trying to get the other child out of the ice, his body, in order for his soul to be free with the rest and for the Grabber to lose more of his powers. The Grabber is in full ice skates, and this is reminiscent of course to the horror film which is Curtains, and Robert Cargill as well as Scott Derrickson have talked about how this movie kind of inspired them to make a whole scene like this, which I think is one of the best climaxes in a horror film, not just this year but in like a decade or more, because this was one of the best scenes in the film, the way it was shot, edited all together. This is an amazing sequence I'm excited to see again on the big screen. It is just so insane, especially because I don't think we really get a lot of winter horror movies nowadays, and I really love that they tried to go in this route with this one. We eventually see that the Grabber is pretty much defeated by Gwen when she realizes that she can hurt the Grabber here. She started to realize this in the previous sequence with the Grabber, that she can actually muster enough power to control her dreams and make the Grabber do whatever she pleases, because this is her reality and her world. And we see with the help of Finney in the real world, both of them are finally able to take down the Grabber and pretty much put an end to him or kill him, or so we think, right? So the end of the film just showcases everybody leaving the camp, and Gwen gets one final phone call from her mother, who tells her how much she loves her and her brother, as well as sending a message of support from Robin on the other side, who is there with her, and pretty much ending this movie on a semi-sweet, like, ending, because we get to see the sort of like closure from Gwen with her mother, as well as with Finney and her father and all of that, which I think was a great way to sort of end this film that really at its core is about trauma. I think trauma that's unresolved. So let's just go over some of the things that probably are still coming up for you watching this movie, and that is exactly how did the grabber even come back? We saw Finney ultimately kill him, break his neck, I believe, in the Black Phone 1, but how did he come back? And that pretty much is up to you to decide. I think he, in fact, is a being from hell now that is sent to torment. And as long as there is the wickedness that he has caused still on this earth, which in this case is the 3 young boys that he killed at Alpine Camp that were never found, that sort of is what he thrives off of, this evil that he has left on the world, this very disturbing like killing that he did at this camp that nobody really even like cared to discover or like showcase, is what makes him come back, in the same sense that is why Freddy Krueger keeps coming back in Nightmare on Elm Street. People remember, people sort of start to wonder what's going on, and this fear and this trauma that's left unresolved is where they draw their strength from. So what are his powers now that he is dead? Well, he's able to infiltrate dreams. He's able to conjure up these scenarios and able to like manipulate you and break you down pretty much like he does to Finney. Still able to hurt you just as he did to the camp leader and also to Gwen, and he's able to kill you ultimately is what he wants to do. And I think just as he's able to conjure up visions like what he did to Gwen to showcase to her what he did to her mom, he's also able to warp realities for everybody involved, just as he's able to keep Gwen in this dream world and ultimately isolate her from everybody else. Why is Gwen the one tormented? Well, Gwen is tormented because he wants to get retribution on Finney, and Finney killed his brother. So I think what the grabber ultimately wants to do is kill Gwen in front of Finney so Finney can suffer that fate, because ultimately the grabber did kill his brother, but he says it was Finney's fault that he had to kill him, and then he will kill Finney. That's pretty much what the grabber is trying to do, is just cause as much pain and torment to these siblings, and that's what his goal is in this film. And I think Gwen and her mom's connection becomes more solidified in this film, as we see they both do suffer through these visions that they have that they can't really control, but they are starting to sort of figure them out as they get older. And now Gwen, with her mother's support from the other side, is able to get more of a hold on it and could potentially be able to make these visions much more controlled and not really let them control her, you know? And is the grabber dead by the end of the film? That's up for interpretation. I want to say if the film does good at the box office, he is not dead. He is coming back for another film. If he is going to be dead, it's if the film doesn't do good at the box office. That's pretty much your catalyst right there. But I mean, if we just want to talk from an artistic standpoint, not the money in Hollywood and how it works, I think the grabber never really dies until all of the unresolved trauma he has caused to everybody is resolved and people sort of confront their trauma, just as Finney did at the end of this film. I think Finney and Gwen's story is wrapped up, in my opinion. I would love if they showcase other characters, if they make a franchise work with the grabber. I don't think we need to put Gwen and Finney again through everything that they've like had happen to them in these past 2 films for the sake of a franchise. I think that the grabber itself can continue on without them, maybe showcase him tormenting other people in his past as well. That's where I would see it going, but we'll see. Hollywood has a way, money has a way, and it always gets in the way of art, but we'll see what happens. Let me know what you think. But I think what we get from the ending of this film is that the grabber really isn't ever gone, as long as there are victims that haven't sort of been found and their souls are still tormented by the grabber, and he sort of draws strength from this fear and from this power he has over his victims. The trauma that's unresolved is where he gets his strength, just like Freddy Krueger, where if somebody remembers what he's done or who he is, he sort of gets stronger. We've seen that in several of the films be a big part of how he's able to return to torment a new generation. And I think we could see that with the grabber. It seems that the grabber has had several victims throughout the years. We didn't even know about the camp ones in the first film, but I mean, what else don't we know about the grabber in between the time that he was killing people at the camp and then eventually as a older adult in the Black Phone? What happened in between that timeline, right? There has to be other victims here, so we could potentially see the grabber return at some point to torment someone else. Will it be Finney and Gwen? I don't know. I don't think so. I feel like their story has wrapped up. I think the ending of this film really gives it a nice bow tie for them to sort of continue on with their lives, and maybe we could see a whole set of other characters that are tormented by the Grabber in another film if they decide to continue the franchise. I think this weekend is going to be a big indication of that. If this film is just as successful as the first one, we could potentially have a franchise that has just been born, and we could continue to see the Grabber torment others as well into the future. So we'll see what happens with that. I think the whole thing with time is so interesting here because Gwen's mother and Gwen were able to communicate with one another almost 30 years apart when they have the phone call, the phone booth, where Gwen learns about what's going on with these young boys that Wild Bill has killed and how exactly the Grabber gets his powers. The Grabber gets his powers from these boys' souls never being able to be freed, and you see that the boys plead to Finney in the phone booth to please help them find them, because that's the only way they can be free and away from this torment they've been in for the past almost 30 years. And we see when Finney's finally able to confront his trauma and really come to terms with what happened to him, when Gwen is sort of like telling him when they're with their father that he has to talk about it and sort of come to terms that he did go through this and that he himself will only ever know what that was. That's when he can begin to heal, and once he begins to heal, he becomes stronger. This movie really is a film about healing from your trauma and not trying to push it or bury it in the ice, because the more you do, the more that trauma, which is the Grabber, the personification of trauma here, becomes stronger and is able to get a grip on you until you eventually lose all hope. The Grabber literally is saying, all who enter here abandon hope, which of course means entering hell. That's what the Grabber is quoting from the Bible and all that. So I think that's a very interesting way to look at this film. It's a film about going through your trauma and having to confront it head on. And because if you don't confront it and keep running away from it and trying to bury it more and more, it eventually gets stronger because it's unresolved and you're not able to really like comprehend how bad that is until it eventually gets to a point where it's just like threatening your sanity, which we see in this film for Gwen and for Finney alike. And I thought the film did an amazing job in that. So will we see the Grabber return at some point? Possibly. We always thought he died in the first one. He didn't. Could we possibly see that maybe for the third one they realize there's more victims out there? There's victims that aren't still able to like come to terms with what happened to them because the Grabber has them buried somewhere or hidden somewhere. That's potentially a way we could see this franchise continue on, just as we did with the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. And I think it's time to showcase some other characters because, like I said, I think Finney and Gwen's story is complete and it's ended on a pretty good note for my opinion. So let me know what you thought about the film in the comments down below. What do you think about the ending in the comments as well? Are you excited about the possibilities of a franchise being born here, or do you think the second one was already enough, or do you think the first one was already enough and we shouldn't have gotten a sequel? Comment it down below. I'm curious to know because so many people have different thoughts on it. I don't think this character of the Grabber is much like Freddy Krueger. There's a lot of similarities, yes, but there's a lot more differences between both of them. And I think Scott Derrickson has delivered a truly unique icon in the horror sphere with the Grabber. So I'm excited to see what he does next, as well as see Robert Cargill. But let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments. And that's going to do it for me. 13 Days of Halloween starts in the next couple of days. We will have a theory of how the Grabber can come back into a franchise. That probably will come out tomorrow or Saturday. So don't miss out on that. And I'll see all of you next time. Stay safe, stay positive.